Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Autism Stories. I'm your host, Doug Bletcher, the founder of Autism Personal Coach. Autistic people are the true experts of the autistic experience, and Autism Stories is where we interview autistic people to learn from their stories, experience, and get their insights. If you would like to be notified about each week's episode of Autism Stories, we suggest you subscribe on your favorite podcast listening platform. We would also appreciate it if you could give us a positive rating and review, as it will help others to learn about autism stories. On today's episode, Dr. Miyabe Shields joins us to discuss their research of cannabis use for neurodivergent people and the impact of the endocannabinoid system on the body. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. I'm so excited to have Dr. Miyabe Shields join us today on Autism Stories. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I'm always excited to talk to the community about my special interest.
Well, this is the place to do it then. And I'd love to kind of start off by learning about your story. Where would you say your story in the autistic community begins?
Interestingly, my story begins as a music teacher. I was a music teacher and co-founded a music nonprofit for neurodivergent adults. And it was for everyone, but I think over half of our students were autistic. We were, we did private music lessons and also played together in bands. And it was the first time I ever felt at home in a community. It was the first time I ever felt like I could be totally myself around a large group of people. It was the first time I felt free. And it was actually during this time, kind of during the time of my own diagnosis. I've had a lot of different diagnoses, and being on the spectrum is just one that one psychologist thought, right? Which is complicated. And so I like the term neurodivergent for that reason, but just for me, but that that's where my story began. It's with finding my community through music and by being a service provider for neurodivergent adults. I did residential caregiving as well. I feel like it helped me get this greater understanding I had always been shaming in myself, that I saw how beautiful brains are, how beautiful and how amazing. And I saw the love and the connection and the joy and the acceptance and the friendship and the beauty of it. The beauty of neurodiversity it's incredible when you're in the right spaces for it like that. It's the most liberating thing in the world. And I saw that it actually transformed my research career and how I approach what I was thinking about myself and what I was thinking about my field of research and how we go about doing it.
Now, something that has helped me in terms of my sleep, because I've been thinking about sleep a lot, I always do. I've always had trouble with sleep. Something in the last year that's kind of really helped me has been taking edibles. And I mention this because, from what I understand, you were labeled a drug user and overused of cannabis, which greatly influenced your care within systems. So what do you hope for the future of these systems to understand about cannabis use to more positively impact not only care for yourself, but for those in our community?
I think the real thing is that neurodivergent people who need accommodations need them daily often. When it comes to other medicines, we never hold other medicines to the same standard of saying that, oh, you need to make sure you take a tolerance break. You need to make sure that you're not consuming too much every day. We would never say that to someone about their prescribed medications, right? It's just your prescribed medications on the schedule that you take that schedule for. It absolutely has impacted my healthcare and my ability to access the system that I've had this diagnosis. And it's really ironic because at the time of the diagnosis, I was getting prescribed a cocktail of psychopharmaceuticals. An interesting thing, I would hope that in the future we could move towards having conversations that for some people, it's not for everyone. According to, we're about to publish this new white paper with our nonprofit where we reanalyzed data from the national government. So the US, I think it's the CDC that funds it, puts on a national survey called the National Survey for Drug Use. It's like the NSDUH. And from their 2022 data, our nonprofit went back and reanalyzed it and saw that there's about 5%, a little bit over 5% of the adult population that consumes cannabis nearly daily, 6 out of 7 days a week. Out of that population, almost half are neurodivergent. Almost 50% are neurodivergent. And also, we have to assume that people might not be answering the federal government correctly. You have to, I mean, there's a chance there that that information might be skewed the wrong way. Now, even so, 50% of over 5% is 2.5%. And that's not a big population. It's a minority, but it is there. And when you scale that 2% up to the population of, like, say, the world, it becomes a very significant number of people who benefit or could benefit from a regular dose schedule of cannabis and who have found what works for their bodies. The real barrier is our understanding and our public education. Our understanding of it's actually pretty good within the community. Our public education and communication of that has been highly, highly suppressed and controlled. And that is really difficult because it's a risk reduction thing, it's a public health thing. There are ways with which we do know that we could advocate for the medical use of this plant that is informed and that people can consume cannabis every day. They're doing it for a medical benefit. They have the intention and they understand dosing. They understand their own dose scheduling and they find what works for them. Because what works for you, like, I actually am not an edible person, but I know a ton of people that edibles are the thing. It's the long duration of action that they like about edibles.
It's interesting having this conversation today because earlier today I was supporting a fellow neurodivergent person at a medical appointment, and they shared that they took an edible, last night due to, they woke up and they were in a lot of pain. And I could see the medical provider kind of step back and their energy changed, even though here in Ohio, medical marijuana is, it's 100% legal and recreational as now. So I guess I'm just wondering, like, kind of the deep seated perception of our medical systems towards cannabis.
Yeah, that's medical discrimination. That is absolutely what that is. That's ableism. Because people who use cannabis and consume cannabis, generally speaking, a huge proportion, about half, according to the national database, about half are neurodivergent. And cannabis works for some of us way better with way less side effects than pharmaceuticals. That's not to say that pharmaceuticals don't work for other people. They do. But it is clear that there's a large percentage of people where with pharmaceuticals don't work that well for, and you have really serious side effects that you don't like and can't live with. Then I'm going to go into the idea of pathology. So the medical system views mental health as a sickness, as a disease. It's actually called mental illness in that NSDUH survey, the 2022 survey that we used to reanalyze. It's actually called mental illness in that space, right? And there's a lot of federal and state level governmental services that still refer to things as from the standpoint of it as a disease. And yes, it is a challenge. It is a disability. It absolutely can impair you. It absolutely can handicap you. It can impact you. That's true. All of those things can be true without it being a disease. All of those things can be true without viewing it as something that is wrong with us that needs to be cured. Instead, it is something that is different about us that makes life challenging. It's something that creates additional barriers. And so the medical system just has a viewpoint on mental health in this way. And cannabis has been like so many different things. It's a lot. It's not just this. In general, substance use and the community of people who would be labeled as addicts in general are medically discriminated against and then prevented from accessing the medical system in that way. Or like when you said that you went to support your friend, I get a ton of anxiety whenever I have to access a traditional medical space. Like even just being in the hospital gives me incredible anxiety. Being in the waiting room, parking in the parking lot outside of a hospital. And we all just have had different experiences with that, right? And our population, specifically the 2.5% or so of us that are neurodivergent cannabis consumers, in general, have not had a good shake of it with the medical system and with the police.
Now, you earlier were talking about community, one of my favorite topics, because we all need a strong support network. So I read that cannabis use has allowed you to form those strong relationships and to build community support that saved your life many times. So, in what ways has cannabis use helped you to build kind of those relationships and navigate community?
Yeah. So when I was in the middle of my PhD, I think this was like 2015 or 2016, a paper got published on. So I also never said what I do. I'm a scientist. Disclosure, I am not a medical doctor. Nothing that I say is medical advice. I never am advising anyone. I'm only ever talking about the science because I feel like just got to be clear. Like I'm only an expert on the interactions of the molecules inside our bodies. And so that's what I studied. I actually studied the system inside of our bodies that interacts with cannabis that causes its effects. It's called the endocannabinoid system. And one of the things that happened when in the middle of my PhD was this paper that got published. It was on my enzyme, that it was on like my specific project. And what it showed was that oxytocin, have you heard of oxytocin before? Yes. Oxytocin is released when mothers give birth to their babies. It's released when you orgasm, like intimately. Like oxytocin is known as a relationship bond building molecule in our bodies. And this paper that came out showed that oxytocin and the effect of oxytocin on mice was actually regulated by the same receptors and the same system that interacts with cannabis. Cannabis is activating the endocannabinoid system, and it's changing the way that system is signaling. And the endocannabinoid system controls oxytocin signaling. So by activating this system, we're changing how oxytocin works in our body too. See how it's like a domino? So that domino, and at least for me, how it played out, how I relate that to my personal experience, is that the first time that I smoked weed was the first time that I looked someone else in the eyes. It was the first time that I was able to make eye contact with someone, and it still felt like jarring, but it felt surprising. It didn't feel painful. That first time that I was able to laugh with a group of people, and we were all laughing at the same thing, and I got it. I got what they were laughing at. At the same time that they were laughing about it. And that had never happened to me before. I was always misunderstanding and only laughing because everyone else was laughing and not really getting why things were funny and not really connecting with other people. And for me, cannabis has given me that ability to connect with others. And it's something I value and cherish. It's one of the things that I like about myself. I like being able to connect with other people, and it saved me. Absolutely, it saved me. I have a huge community of people that have kept me alive. I'm extremely grateful for it, and really lucky, super fortunate too. I'd never felt that way before, and when I found cannabis, I was already having tons of suicidal ideation, like at the age of 14, 15. It started earlier than that, so this changed my life, saved my life. And in so many ways, but definitely being able to make friends has been just so critical.
I wonder if you could talk more about the endocannabinoid system because you're an expert who's part of the scientific advisory board at Applied. I'm gonna mispronounce it.
Or pharmacognosy.
Okay, yes, thank you.
It predates pharmacology. The pharmacognosy is the study of what is called crude extracts, but cannabis is often a crude extract. It's just straight from the plant into your body. Yeah, what would you like to know about the ECS? I mean, I just don't know where to begin. It's the most important system in the body.
I want to hear your bias in terms of
Okay.
just kind of educating people that might not even be familiar about this system and what its impact does on the body.
The most important thing to know about it is that it is a master regulator of the other systems. It is everywhere in the body. It controls things in the central nervous system and in the immune system. Those two, your central nervous system, your brain functionality, and your immune system, your body's ability to help itself, to heal itself. Those two things are so critical for our continued health and wellness as we go through any number of things. But this is going to be a theory, so I have to disclose this. But, we all have a lot of overstimulatory lives. We are overstimulated by information. We are overstimulated in our food and in our diets. We are overstressed by our requirements of securing housing and food for ourselves and safety and healthcare. We are stressed and overstimulated and inflamed. We are inflamed. Inflammation. When people hear about inflammation, they think of like a cut lip, or they think of something swollen. But inflammation can happen inside the body at a chemical level. You are chemically inflamed. You have inflammatory signaling molecules going around. Now, the endocannabinoid system is responsible for decreasing that inflammation. The endocannabinoid system reduces that. And when you reduce inflammation, just in general, when you reduce it, you are allowing our body's immune system to better identify and function. And you're also reducing, when you reduce overstimulation, you're allowing your brain to have some time that it doesn't have to process so much that it's over processing. Sometimes I can feel my brain overheating. I can almost feel the inside of it feeling to get that way where it's like I am thinking way too much, way too fast, way too many thoughts all at the same time. And I always have more than one thought going on, at least like a couple, but like to have so many and to be able to slow that down, that's what the endocannabinoid system does. And it does it, and it functions in a completely different way than any other system. It's the only one that operates in an opposite direction. It's called retrograde for that reason. It's a retrograde signaling system, meaning it goes in reverse, like retro. And all of the other neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, GABA, glycine, right? They're all going down a one-way street. It's like a river. Imagine you've got a river and it's flowing down, right? It's only going to flow downhill. Now, what happens if that river is going too fast? What happens if there's too much water and you need to close the dam a little bit? You need to reduce the amount of things. How are you going to do that if all of the neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine, GABA, glycine, they're all going one direction? They're all going downstream. The endocannabinoid system is the only system that is capable of being like a little like walkie or something that goes upstream and can tell people, hey, it tells the brain, hey, you gotta slow down. You have to signal less. And people think that that's a bad thing. People label stoners as lazy. They label stoners as slow. Some brains are slow. The neurodiversity is such that all brains are all things. If you really put it out there, there's a brain for everything. And so some brains are slow. And some brains, with cannabis, become slower to the point where they are less productive and like maybe it's difficult to meet your needs. But some brains are fast and some brains are overstimulated and some brains have too many thoughts going on. And for those brains, slowing down, that's not a bad thing. That's actually like the only thing that you're trying to do, like in general, to be able to regulate. So that's what the endocannabinoid system is capable of. That's how powerful it is. It controls everything from metabolism, our energy metabolism, to the activity of our brain cells and our communication cells, to our immune system. And those are the big three that, it does so many things on top. Skin health, understanding our skin health, understanding like tumor growth, and there's like anti-tumorigenic type effects. There's so many little downstream things that come of it, but the larger overall metabolism, the immune system, and the overall activity of our brains and our ability to self-regulate.
So, hearing you speak about this, talking about the inflammation with the endocannabinoid system, that makes me think about autistic burnout, neurodivergent burnout, things like that. Is there any current research relating these things, and what is the research saying?
Oh, there's some really cool research that I think it's Dr. Bonnie Goldstein's team is doing this metabolism research on you can get from the saliva and measure different levels of the molecules that we are producing that are activating the system. Because yes, when you take cannabis, it activates the same system. It's going to activate this system, but our body is making its own molecules that also activate the system. And so you can measure the different amounts. You could measure how much of that we have in our body. And what they've been finding is that with treatment of cannabis, different products, and a lot of hemp products actually too, but there's some that were ratioed, like with THC, with CBN. That's what I mean by ratioed, like, having a certain amount. I'm sure you've seen the edibles that have the different rare cannabinoids in them. Yes. So some of the products were that way. But one thing that was so cool that they saw was that, first of all, in the autistic population, there were differences in the metabolic profile. There were differences in what the fat metabolism situation looked like, the little snapshot. Now, when people used cannabis products, those differences decreased and their behavioral challenges decreased. Like certain things, like I think everyone was challenged with different things, right? But it was interesting because they actually found that, yes, cannabis caused a change or looks like it's causing a change in this early study, at a metabolic level, and that this also is correlated with helping quality of life improvements. And I can say that my brain is entirely different when I'm not using cannabis. And in terms of metabolism and eating and diet, and I struggle with my relationship with food too. These are things I'm really excited for us to start to explore more. Like that research really excites me because diet has been one of my most biggest and impactful things that I've been able to change about my life. Aside from cannabis, it would be my diet and how I try to eat as low inflammatory as a diet as possible. Just as little inflammation molecules as I can, even though I'm a little flexible because I love to have carbs and I like sugar and, sugar is the number one inflammatory thing that we all got going on. I get excited for the future research because there's so much. And we're in our white paper. So the white paper we're about to publish in 2 weeks. So I'll send it to you also because you could put it in the link. But our white paper does the analysis of the 2022 NSDUB data from the US. And it also includes data from the neurodivergent cannabis survey that our nonprofit has a data set of the first known self-reported neurodivergent cannabis survey that lists out that there was an interesting pattern that arose. Neurodivergent cannabis consumers fell into a category of multiple diagnoses in terms of I don't believe in diagnosis. When I say that, I think diagnosis is useful to help us find the right accommodations for us and find community. But overall, the DSM is not based on biological validity. And it's the way that mental health is used and diagnosed with people has a lot to do with systemic biases, racism, other problems, homophobia, tons of problems that are, always coexist with the neurodivergent population. And then we experience the downstream effects of that, right? But when I say diagnoses, I just meant indications, when asking it. And what we found was that there's a pretty similar distribution of co-occurrences of multiple diagnoses that people have. And that the respondents of neurodivergent cannabis consumers, the average response was to have about 3 different diagnoses. Now that's a lot. I mean, when people talk about the neurodiversity movement, a lot of the advocates are 1 or 2. I think ADHD might be the most common overlap that I see. ADHD, OCD, right? Like there's these overlaps that occur, but I rarely see. And the lived experience educator, Sunny, shout out to Sunny Jane Wise is one of the most like one of my inspirational like neurodivergent advocates out there that I look up to with their content. And like to see more than that, to see multiple indications. And the neurodivergent cannabis community, the average was 3. So you had 3 indications. The most common, like first bucket indication would be like ADHD, autism, major depressive disorder, PTSD. Those are the most common, like big chunks where there's like a lot of people in there. But then after that, the overlap with the other things like migraines, seizures and epilepsy, TBI, psychosis and schizophrenia, like am I missing one? Oh, multiple sclerosis. The overlap with those other ones, it followed a similar pattern, which was just interesting, but I don't even know what it means yet. It's that I think at the very least, what it means is that there's a common experience here of having multiple diagnoses, of being a complicated patient, of being a challenge to the healthcare system, and therefore a challenge to your own health and wellness. And we're hoping that with this paper, we can start discussions around talking about it from the context of ableism, because it is, and the understanding of like a very specific population that has a specific like phenotype. So in cannabis, I don't know if you're aware, but in cannabis, if you have one strain and it's grown from different seeds, that plant could look very different when it grows up, even though they're like brothers and sisters and they come from the same seeds. Those differences that the cannabis plant shows is called a phenotype. Because a phenotype is just like, what does the plant actually look like? That's after its genetics. And it seems like there is a shared experience and like some forms of shared overlaps and shared phenos in us, in our population of cannabis consumers. So that's also another thing. I would love to get together and merge those 2 research projects together and do the metabolic testing for everyone that is a daily cannabis consumer. And I would love to do that and see what our favorite products are. Because right now, when people ask me, what should I do if I have anxiety? What should I do with this? What should I do with that? I mean, I can only tell people what I would do. And I am not the same as everyone else. We're all different. And I think that the future of neurodivergent cannabis and medicine is going to be to better help and have an idea of where we can guide people to through this lived experience and in combination with the biochemistry.
Earlier this year, your book High Hopes was published, which is the quest of a queer neurodivergent stoner scientist. And so this makes me think about something that I often have talked about here on Autism Stories, which is intersectionality. So where do you think we're currently at with thinking about intersectionality within the stoner scientist community?
So I love that you asked this question because we are about to host an event that is free and open to the public. It's in Vegas at Planet 13 on December 4th. And it's also going to be live streamed on YouTube. So it'll be 2 to 6 p.m. Pacific time because it'll be in Vegas. We're hosting a science panel. It's curated science panels and discussions on real world evidence and the impact of science on the community and how we can maximize how science gives back to our communities. And one of the panels that's speaking is called Science Ingenuity Through Intersectionality. I am so excited for this panel. Okay, I was asked on one of my first panels that I ever did, the question was, who did you look up to when you were younger? When we're talking about intersectionality, and if I'm just going to be totally honest, I was like taken aback. I was like, wow, I actually don't have anyone that comes to mind that looks like me, that has the same intersections that I do, doing anything close to what I'm trying to do. And I like didn't know what to say at first. But then the answer came to me like, it's in my peers, because there's a lot of intersectional scientists in the space in cannabis. There's a lot of neurodivergent scientists that are coming into, we are becoming more confident in calling ourselves neurodivergent scientists. We are, leaving academia. We are operating outside of the system that doesn't want to support us. Not to say that there aren't supportive places in academia. Academia absolutely could be beautiful and supportive, but not everyone has that experience. And also, not everyone's opinions are aligned with the status quo of academia. And academia is still largely ableist. Papers on autism still call it a disorder. The word conditions, deficit, defective, that language is still used in scientific academic papers. So, like, I have a hard time being in that space. I mean, I'm not thinking about my brain in that way. I'm not thinking about us that way. I refuse because it's also the best things. And you have to feel that way about it. Because when you meet the best, it's so clear. The only people I mess with now are neurodivergent. Like, it's, but that's not how academic research is. That's not, but I'm saying that in terms of intersectionality in the sciences in general, not just in cannabis, but I do think that cannabis has the potential of big explosions for that because cannabis is already counterculture. And so you already have that counterculture sort of vibe going on. And I think that that encourages or can facilitate people feeling more open, saying that they're neurodivergent in a space where everyone's weird. The cannabis industry is made up of a majority of cannabis consumers. I think it's something like if our NECAN Boston data was like near 80%. Our NECAN Syracuse data looked to be about the same. We haven't analyzed it yet, but like the industry is made up of cannabis consumers. Cannabis consumers, many of whom are neurodivergent, like half, right, or more. I would argue more. Our data set, our longitudinal data set, says that out of the daily consumers we had, like 4,500 people, it was over 70% of people who identified as neurodivergent. So this is like this is a population. We exist, right? We're weird. We're definitely not like the average. We're not the average. We're 2.5%. We're a minority. We're a small minority, but we're here and we have things in common. I do very much so think that the science community it's happening, and I see it all the time in other people who inspire me with what they post about, you know? And so the panel, the science ingenuity through intersectionality, is the 4/15/4/20. That's when it starts panel on that day. And it features 4 of the scientists in the field that I think push boundaries and only push boundaries the way that they do because of their intersectionality. I think that there's the focus of that panel is very much so about how we can understand and value intersectionality properly. Because right now, intersectionality is being valued as something that is necessary for equity. Like people are saying, oh, we need to learn about intersectionality so that we could truly make equity. Yes, like we want to help make this a more just and equal space. And so we're searching to look at intersectionality and look at the challenges with intersectionality. Because if we study the challenges that occur, then we can fix those challenges and it will be an equitable future. And I don't believe in that for one lick of 1 second, because I don't think that equity is possible. I think we need more power. As the way that it is right now, we will never get equity because we're not in the right positions to make the changes that we need to make in society. And we're not valued or respected in the right ways for our opinions to ever be taken as more than a token opinion of a minority. And like what we're going to be moving towards, I think, and what I would love to move towards instead in this ingenuity through an intersectionality panel is not just saying that we need to look at intersectionality so that we can help with the challenges and help build equity. We need to start looking at intersectionality because intersectionality is innovation. It's community. It's what is pushing. It's the things that are going to make this break, right? And it's the way that we need to change our systemic cultures. And the people who are aligned with the status quo, the more aligned you are with the status quo, the more difficult it is for you to see outside of that system. And for the people who are already outside of that system and intersectionally affected, it's easier to make connections that are outside of that framework. And therefore, it is invaluable. And if we go about it that way, then suddenly we're able to show and prove and and see where we should be attributing our value as a science community, as a research community. And I very much so think intersectionality is something that deserves more attention, not just in the negative, not just in the challenges, and not just in what we need to do to make it more equitable. Because it's not going to be more equitable. That's kind of my thing. All the equity things I've seen have been like, it's hard. I think that it's good for them to try. What we need more of is to just have that value, and I think we're getting it. So I'm super excited.
When you said token, the thing that kind of triggered in my mind was, I'm thankful for this panel, love that this panel is happening. But I feel like if intersectionality isn't involved in everything we do, then I guess I'm wondering, is that, and nothing against this conference, appreciate the panel. Is that just tokenism in itself?
It is. It's like the other thing too that's hard is that the argument being that if you don't create the space, then it doesn't exist. Right? Like then we're in this constant balance and a constant responsibility of how much educating do you do in your day to day? How many conversations do you have? And what changes do you look to make in your life and in your, in what you're trying to do? I think that's a hard balance to hit for sure. Because the option of not doing it and not saying anything too is clearly there. It's always there. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like like what you're saying. I get what you're saying. It's like I struggle with it. What is the right thing to do in terms of like creating something in the future that's different? And one of the things that I'm hoping to do, that this is like a component of it with our nonprofit. Our nonprofit is outside of the industry and academia, and we function so that we can collaborate with both, but we are independent. And the reason why we want to maintain that independence is because it allows us to do and create things in spaces that are different and that are evolving and that are changing. We're making the soundtrack for this is just one small example of like what is happening inside here and inside the nonprofit, but we're making the soundtrack for the music for the event, the background music and the lead-in music, because to start off each of these panels, what are we, what is the vibe? And we were showing we had our first meetings today, actually, right before this meeting with you. We had our first meetings today with our panels, and we were like showing them the vibe. And the feedback is like, anyways, just like what vibe do we want versus what vibe? Because for Dr. Riley Kirk and myself, like we have been called radical scientists before. We embrace that. And I think that we can do things differently, and I want to do things differently than how it has been done traditionally before in the sciences. And what I mean by that is like the sciences are stuffy. The sciences are boring, and the sciences are uncomfortable. They're professional. The sciences are clean. The sciences are unapproachable. The sciences are all of these words that I associate with professional scientific spaces. And instead being like, we want to create a space where everyone's welcome. And I think that's another evolution, I guess, in terms of what you were saying about tokenization and like how having anything at all related to intersectionality becomes that just by default of needing to be intersectional to be on that panel, right? Mm-hmm. Like to be able to speak from that lived experience. I think that the goal would be to create a science space, a science education community that it would not be tokenization, because the environment and the community itself is not stuffy, is not boring, is not clean. The community itself is fun, excited, engaged, there. The community is diverse. The community has different backgrounds. The community is asking different questions. And like, then it becomes a highlight. Then it's not tokenization because it's just the highlighting of that component of our community. And right now it's not in the sciences. The sciences are very white, just in general. And the sciences have high barriers to entry. That's why the sciences have a high barrier to entry. and tons of different reasons why people get crowded out of going into the sciences as a career and crowded out even after you're a scientist. I mean, I've left the scientific world twice since getting my PhD. I've full blown quit and been like, fuck the scientists. Yeah, not all of them, but most of them, and I've felt that like the alienation. And our goal, I think, is if you can create a space that doesn't have that alienation, then it won't be tokenism. Then it's just the highlighting of the other people in the space that you want to see speak on that topic. But you can't not make it tokenism without changing the space and changing the culture and changing the environment. And that's what we're trying to do. And it's going to be an evolution, I'm sure. But I'm so excited. Like, I don't think there's ever been a science conference that's going to. The music itself is highly contested. The music choices have been suspected, and some people are suggesting new edits. And then there's other people who are suggesting music choices that are out of left field. And I'm like, whoa, like, you really want us to play that? Okay.
Are the music choices, can those under 18 come and listen to this music?
Well, no one can go in the dispensary who's not under 21, so why does it matter?
That's a good point.
I mean, that's my argument. You can't even get in unless you're 21. So,
Fair enough. Yeah.
I mean, that's like, also, like, I'm not trying to censor myself when I'm on stage. Like, this is a performance. Like, I'm really excited because I come from a music background. Like, when I was mentioning about the nonprofit, we did events. I'd say the most comparable event to this that I've done was a show at the Hard Rock Cafe. And I also did a concert on the Boston Common that was similar, like a similar length amount of time that we are going to be on stage and like organizing the show. 4 hours is a long show. I'm really, really excited because I had never clicked it together that this is performance, that science communication, when it is done right, is fun. Bill Nye is great for a reason. He's a comedian. He was discovered at a stand-up comedy show. And like Neil deGrasse Tyson. We're going to have the Neil deGrasse Tyson of cannabis on that. Stephen Philpott Jr., like major shout out. A vet who also is an exercise and cannabis expert. This is what I'm saying. Like, I think bringing a little bit of music, bringing a little bit of sports events, a little bit of athletics. I thought Stephen was just like clicking that in my mind. Bringing a little bit of that entertainment value, bringing a little bit of that production to the sciences will make it more accessible. Because people got turned off from the sciences when they were in middle school. Middle school was the time when most people had a bad science teacher who didn't know science. Most middle school science teachers, like a large number of them, like, I mean, did you major in a science? What science? Like, I don't mean to be mean or beat people up about that. It's just true, depending on what state you live in, that the sciences are not often taught by ex-scientists who love science. They're often taught by people who, like, I don't even want to say this because it sounds really bad, and I love teachers and I want to support teachers, and there's like teachers are underpaid and undervalued too much. But it is true that a lot of people in middle school have had science teachers who, and it doesn't even have to be the teacher's fault. It's just like the teaching style wasn't good for the student. We're in classes of 40 or 50 kids. You're trying to just learn from a book. I had little, what are they? They were transparencies, and they used to write on the transparencies because I'm old enough to be pre-PowerPoint era. And the chalkboards, I learned on chalkboards. I was gifted with really good science teachers. But for everyone else, and for a majority of people who are creative and curious and would love the sciences, for everyone else who has matured since they were in middle school, have had way more life experience and way more ability to contextualize that knowledge, a lot of people haven't seen the science be talked about at that level about something that they're interested in. And cannabis is super interesting. And people who smoke weed are super interested in it. It's a perfect storm to create something for everyone, to create science, high-level scientific conversations about chemistry, about real-world evidence and epidemiological, like demographics, about like neurodiversity. We can have those really high-level conversations, but we can have them with the audience. We can have them, at the same level that we need to generate good conversation and to start what we all kind of view as what we would hope to be a growing movement of a body of cannabis neurodivergent cannabis medical users who understand enough to be dangerous. Let's give ourselves the right knowledge, the right language. Let's learn how we can talk about ourselves in a way that people understand the discrimination, in a way that people understand the medical benefits, and in a way that helps you communicate with your doctors, your medical professionals, your family members, your friend members, your everyone, your coworkers. Let's have the language to have conversations with them where they will respect what is happening and not just see it as being lazy drug users. You know, it's a conversation that needs to be had, and it comes from changing people's perspective on why it is we're consuming and what we're doing, and we exist. So, I mean, this is really exciting. It's honestly feels really overwhelming. Like I have a lot of emotions. I sent the journal to print today. We made the final. We're printing a journal that has just our nonprofit turned 1 year old last month. 4 big national level projects, and we're disclosing the data that happened in the last year. We're giving like a little preview before any of them go to the peer review, and I'm so excited. I'm just excited for where this community can go together because it's something that I never saw for myself as a specialty, neurodivergent cannabis. Like I never necessarily thought that, but there's this saying where it's like research is me search. It's one of those things that I can't even describe what emotions I'm going to feel when it's happening because I really want that to be where we're at with our community advocacy. I think that I want us to come together. There's so much good that we can do together, and it's already happening. And the people that I'm working with they're already picking up what I'm putting down. And where I generally only like neurodivergent people, which gets me in trouble when I say that and someone doesn't think that they're neurodivergent. And I'm not out here convincing anyone else that they're neurodivergent or not. You get to be the only person that makes that decision for yourself. But generally speaking, I only get along with neurodivergent people these days. If people aren't neurodivergent, I'm yawning.
Now, getting back to your book, I always enjoy a good book title, and High Hope speaks, at least to me, of thinking optimistically about a future where cannabis use is helping our world. So, what can each one of us do if we're not stoner scientists, for example, to make this future a reality that you envision?
I think I would argue, okay, I've got this right here, and you'll have to email me your address so I could send this to you.
Okay,
But
I'll do that.
our members, we have in our first year, we have over 7,000 people who are in our network of applied pharmacognosy, and everyone ranges from being PhD scientists, MD doctors, and researchers in the space, and industry researchers, cultivators, people who grow, geneticists, and then bud tenders. And then there's just people who love to consume cannabis. So one of the ways that would be great for people to contribute, we do research and we regularly poll, like we use all the data points that we collect all the time. And I would like to I would thank you for reaching out also. Like you already have participated in my research career by having this conversation with me. Like everyone that we engage with on our community level is intimately part of what we're building towards seeing in the future. So I am really optimistic. If people want to follow the nonprofit, sign up to join the network to get our emails. You'll hear about our studies we're about to launch. We're currently recruiting for a natural product study that is non-cannabis. It's natural products in the kratom kava space, which are for pain, focus, and quality of life. We're going to start recruiting for a study with I'm really interested in this one. This study is going to be about something that makes you less high. So it's like a little drink that you could take that then makes you, like, for example, for me, I'm actually going to try it with edibles. I'm going to do it at home, but edibles often are a little too much for me. And I'm excited to see if this works because I would love to start using edibles more. I do prefer flower, but there's undeniable benefits of edibles. That long duration of action is really great for for edibles. So I would really love to figure that out. And I'm on a tangent. We're going to start recruiting for that study soon too. And if you're on our email list, then you see the studies, you see the events that we're going to be at. We're going to be at the event at Planet 13 in Vegas on December 4th. It's free. It's a non-ticketed event. So if you can get at the dispensary, you just come onto the back and we'll be doing some speed networking, panels and stuff like that. And otherwise, just staying connected to us. Yeah, like our socials, it's Applied Pharmacognosy, hard to spell. So you'll have to drop it and then in the description. I'll send it to you. And yeah, just, on the personal level, of what we could all do personally, I would like to encourage everyone to like make a commitment to themselves to think about their own use as medicine. So that was something that really helped me to stop shaming myself and also helped me to start reframing. I often, because of reframing this, will not consume. It's not super often, but it happens. I'll be like, yeah, I'm fine right now. And it's about this mindset of changing how we ourselves are looking at it. And that's the first step of us actually believing it. And once we believe that our use is medical, it's much easier to have conversations around it without feeling so triggered. Like I would say an example of this is like from an intersectional example is that, when you're feeling insecure about something, like if you're in the closet, like when I wasn't sure about coming out, being queer, being non-binary, like I wasn't sure, I was feeling scared. Then the conversations that are around that felt like they were attacking me. It was like, you're asking me about this thing that I'm really insecure about. Once I could accept it, I fully grasp it, similar to the medical cannabis thing. Once I fully grasped that, I was able to have so many more conversations where my response wasn't out of defensiveness and fear. I think that starts with us and our own understanding and trust in ourselves, in our self-determination of our own medicine, and in our self-esteem of who we are as people and as good people who are trying our best. All right. I mean, everyone's both good and bad. Everyone's got a little bit of all that wrapped up in there. We come to an understanding about that we're not going to shame ourselves about it and that we're going to understand it truly and embrace it as its medical use. And I think that helps from a personal standpoint. I think that has helped me the most.
And Doctor, how can our listeners learn about you and Applied Pharmacognosy beyond this interview?
I'm pretty active on Instagram. That's kind of like the one that I like. I'm a middle millennial, right there on the decade. I really like it. It's just my name, Miyabe with PhD at the end of it. Signing up for our email newsletter, which is at the website, which is appliedpharmacognosy.org, which you'll have the link. It's hard to spell. Our YouTube is just getting up. We're doing live streams on there, but we have a YouTube, which is the same handle as our Instagram. Oh, just as a thing, I get this kind of often where people will message me after an event and be like, I saw you and you were busy and you were talking to people, but I just want to say that like I saw you and this is me, like, because I've been messaging some people online for like years, I've been doing this for a bit. Also, if I haven't messaged you back, I'm sorry. It's also about about a couple of years ago, I stopped taking new messages, and I do now when I meet people in person. So if you want to slide into my DMs, you got to come up to me if you see me in person so that I can make sure I follow you back. Because I put people in different categories when that happened. Like I'm able to see better, like the messages that come in. I just want to say that when we're at events, we are there to meet people. And I love meeting people in person. I never thought that I would be connected to so many people and be in so many people's like stories or like, like helping so many people, honestly. And it's been like an incredible gift. So I would just like to like thank everyone, but also say that another way to connect is that if you do like, don't ever feel like you can't come up and interrupt because all conversations are a flow. Even if a rock gets thrown into the middle of a flow of something, it's going to make a different ripple and everything will adjust. Yeah, I really appreciate these questions and being on here and talking about it. This has been really cool.
Well, it was wonderful to talk with you, and I hope this is the first of many conversations we have. Thanks so much. Thank you so much to Miyabe for the conversation. To learn more about Miyabe, please check out the link in the podcast description for this episode. We always love hearing from you and would especially love to hear from you relating to this episode regarding if cannabis has helped you in your life and your ability to regulate. Did you know Autism Personal Coach provides neurodiversity affirming support by autistics for autistics? We empower autistic adults and teens to lead self directed, purpose driven lives through our customized life coaching and community groups. So please join us today to experience judgment free coaching rooted in empathy, expertise, and respect for autistic identity. Until next time, I'm Doug Bletcher of Autism Personal Coach. Talk to you then.